Continuing in A Letter to Mrs. Roosevelt by Coco De Young. We're going to do chapters 9 through 12. Chapter 9, Dominoes. The arguing at Rose's continued long after she'd gone home. I couldn't sleep. Charlie had gone to bed shortly after dinner and was snoring softly. The house was quiet except for Mama and Papa's talking. I sat on the top step and listened. "I have enough flour to bake bread during the week," said Mama. "I will need flour next week." "I will go into town for the flour," said Papa. His voice sounded unusually soft. I knew that going into town instead of to Frappa's store meant that Papa would stand in the long line of people who were also waiting for a 50-pound sack of flour. I'd waited in line with him several times. The walk home was always a quiet one. I suspected the heavy weight of the sack on Papa's shoulders was not the only thing that bothered him. They continue to cut more work hours. How can a man support his family working 1 day a week? Papa was talking about Mr. Meglio. He's not angry with his family. He's a proud man who is willing to work. It's hard to accept handouts. His anger comes from a sad heart. I understood what Papa was saying because Miss Dobson had explained dominoes to our class. She told us that a very large number of people worked in the steel mill. When the mill cut the workers' hours back, they had less money to spend. If they didn't have the money to spend, they couldn't afford to buy as much food or clothing or to pay their bills. Then the businesses where they bought had fewer and fewer customers, like the banks, the grocery stores, and Papa's store. I remember Miss Dobson saying, when one domino fails to stay up, it causes a chain reaction, knocking the others down one by one. She told us that was how the problems of the Great Depression had grown worse. The big businesses would have to grow stronger before the smaller businesses could stay up. I suppose Miss Dobson knew all this because she read her father's newspaper every day. I didn't think the dominoes had started to fall at Mr. Dobson's business. I always saw people in Johnston's Central Park carrying a newspaper. I'd even seen men asleep on the park benches covered with the newspaper. It grows more difficult each week. Papa's voice caught my attention. I cannot turn away people who bring me work. There are those who can pay, and there are those who want to pay. What can I do? Should I turn away the father who needs a buckle for his child's shoe when the shoe is already 2 sizes too small? Do I turn away the farmer who offers me 2 bushels of apples for a pair of soles when the bottom of each shoe has a hole the size of my fist? The bills from the bank. I couldn't hear all that Mama was saying. "We have nothing to be ashamed of. We ask for help, and we give help," said Papa in a firm voice. I suppose that was why Mama insisted we open the back door to the men who knocked at it. They were usually the hobos who got out of the boxcars when the train stopped in the brickyard. They used to jump down from the raised trestle. Now they used a wooden ladder someone had hammered into the wall next to the tracks. Nobody in the neighborhood knew who put it there, and nobody wanted to take it down. I remember one day a boy, just a little older than me, came to our back door. He told Mama he'd gladly work for a bite to eat. It must have been hard for Mama because she stood there for a long time and didn't say a word. The boy finally said, "Sorry to have bothered you, ma'am. Your house has the mark on it. I'll go away now." Something he said or did woke Mama up from her daydream because she grabbed him by the arm and said, "No, no, figlio mio, my son. I'll make you a sandwich while you take that laundry off the clothesline for me. You can set it in that basket on the ground." Papa insisted that Mama gave the hobos a small job when they asked. "It lets them swallow their food with dignity," he always said. I remembered how Mama made the young man 2 large sandwiches, then sent me outside to give them to him. He had the clothes neatly folded and stacked in the basket. "Gee, thanks," I said. "That would have been my job. You can sit on the porch and eat." He was very polite and explained that he wouldn't have troubled us, except that the mark on the brick foundation of our front porch was a sign the other hobos put there to say it was okay to knock on our door. When he left, I looked for the mark on the spot where he mentioned. It was there, in chalk, a circle with an X in the center. When I showed Papa later that evening, he went out and traced it in white paint. It's still there. Mama and Papa were talking very softly now. I couldn't hear them. I crawled into bed and pulled the blanket over my shoulders. The November air was getting chilly. I was just about to close my eyes when I heard a door open. I looked out the window facing Rose's front porch. Mr. Meglio was walking down his front steps, carrying a small bundle like the hobos. I knew then and there that what I'd been so afraid of. It wasn't the dark, it was the dominoes. The dominoes that had started to fall at the steel mill had reached Maple Avenue. Chapter 10, The Assignment. I could feel the lack of sleep in everything I did on Sunday. Our house was filled with people all afternoon as they stopped by after church. Papa played his mandolin, and the neighbors sang along. Oh, Marie, oh, Marie. I'm sure Mrs. Meglio could hear the singing, but she never came over with Rosa or Michael. Mama needed my help. I didn't see Rosa at all. The whole day passed in slow motion. The next morning, Rosa was waiting for me on her front steps, as she always did. The walk to school was usually a quiet one on Monday mornings. Today, Rosa surprised me with her constant chatter. She talked about everything and everyone except her father. I was relieved to walk into her classroom. I wanted so much to ask Rosa if she would have to move, but she never gave me a chance to get one word in. We took our seats in time to see Miss Dobson hand a stack of newspapers to Lola Nola. Lolo has bright red hair and freckles. She stepped on a boy's toe. I heard it crunch when he said, "Hurry up, Freckleface." She got to my desk and smiled. "I guess he won't be playing dodgeball at recess," she said. Miss Dobson used the newspapers and a map of the world to teach geography. She probably knew most of us would never leave Johnstown, Pennsylvania, but it was as though she cast a spell on us when she taught. Sometimes I would close my eyes in class while she talked about the customs and foods of different countries. I pictured it all in my mind. Someday, maybe someday, I would really be there. Today, all eyes were on Rosa in geography class, especially every time she raised her hand and gave a little ooh, ooh, to answer one of Miss Dobson's questions. It worked twice. Then Miss Dobson told Rosa to collect the newspapers. Rosa kept smiling the whole time, as if nothing unusual had happened to her family. At recess, she just continued smiling and talking and never once mentioned her father. I was getting really annoyed. We usually talked to each other about everything. Another set of newspapers was passed out at the end of history class just before dismissal. Miss Dobson was writing an assignment in huge letters that spread across the board from one end to the other. Chalk dust flew through the air, casting a white film on her fingers and speckling her black shoes. A loud squeak of the chalk on the board brought the entire class to attention. Letters due on Wednesday. Corrected on Thursday. Mailed on Friday. Stamps will be provided. Class, I have saved these old newspapers for a reason. They are all from different days and months and date back to March 5th, the day after President Roosevelt's inauguration. His dream is to pull our country out of this terrible state of poverty. He continues to work hard, as does our First Lady, Eleanor Roosevelt. They remain confident that this can be done. So must you and I. Therefore, your assignment is to study the newspaper in front of you. Take it home with you. Trade papers if you must. You are to find an article written about a person who inspires you, a person who has done something to support our country and President Roosevelt's belief that better times are ahead. Then you are to write a letter to that person. Let the person know how he or she has inspired you. I had to admit, the newspaper sitting on my desk had me wondering. That day had the quietest dismissal I'd ever seen, especially after Miss Dobson told us the assignment would be our only history grade this term. Chapter 11, Bad News. You wouldn't kid me, would you? This assignment is a cinch, exclaimed Rosa. She held the heavy wooden door for me as we left Maple Avenue School. One whole day, and she still hadn't said a word about moving or about her father leaving. Now she was going on and on about the assignment. I don't even need the newspaper. I know exactly who I'm writing to, said Rosa. Last year, Amelia Earhart became the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. It took her 13 hours and 13 minutes. Can you imagine sitting in one spot all that time with nobody to talk to? I'd be so bored that I'd never be able to keep my eyes open. I think I'll tell her what an inspiration she is to me. She showed the world that women can set daring and dangerous records, too. I purposely walked faster, which usually annoyed Rosa. Not today. I think I'll even tell her how I stay awake in Miss Moeller's English class by telling myself jokes. I just might include a few of those jokes to help Amelia stay awake the next time she sets a record. Rosa finally stopped talking. I was just about to say, Rosa, what kind of record are you trying to set? Or, Rosa, I know about your father. I never got the chance. As we neared home, we both saw Mama at the same time. She was walking out of Rosa's front door, carrying the pot she uses to deliver soup or pasta to neighbors who need help. A car was parked at the curb outside Rosa's house. A well-dressed woman was carrying a basket of clothes up the sidewalk to Rosa's front door. "Here," was all Rosa said. She handed her newspaper to me and took all 3 of her front porch stairs in one leap, practically knocking Mama and the woman off their feet. Mama never said a word as we climbed our own porch stairs. I held the door open for her, and she kissed my forehead as she walked past me. That was when I noticed her tear-stained cheeks. Everything was all mixed up. Rosa had never stopped talking all day, and here was Mama, as quiet as could be. Something kept me from going to Rosa's to see if she could play. Instead, I stood at our door watching and waiting, hoping she would come to my house. I had been standing there for quite some time when Mama finally started to talk. "Margot, come away from the door and set the table, please. Your papa will be home soon." Mama was stirring a small pot of soup with the long silver ladle she had brought from her mother's kitchen in Italy. It wasn't a fancy ladle, not like sterling silver, but Mama treasured it the way Papa had treasured his gold pocket watch. The only time the ladle had ever left the stove was to get washed. While Mama was calling Charlie to dinner, I lifted the lid and glanced into the pot. The water was bubbling very slowly. The chopped celery, tomato, onion, and carrots danced around the bare bone, sitting on the bottom like a rock. No meat for the 4th day in a row. I breathed in deeply. It still smelled delicious. If I closed my eyes real tight, I could pretend I smelled the meat, too. Papa, Charlie, and Mama all came through the front door together as I tucked the last napkin into its place. I was happy Papa was home. He always listened to the news, so he might think of someone for me to write to. But dinner was exceptionally quiet. Mama kept looking at Papa, who said very little. Charlie kept looking at me as though he wanted to tell me something important. I decided it might be best to check the newspapers, the one Miss Dobson had given me and the one Rosa had given me, before bothering Papa with my assignment. I was in my room with the newspapers spread across the floor when Charlie came in. "Margot, it's all my fault," he said as he sat on my bed. "Don't worry, Charlie. Papa isn't really angry about the watch. Someone will know how to fix it." "I'm not talking about the watch, Margot. I'm talking about the letter Papa received from the bank. It was signed by Mr. Lockhart. I wasn't going to tell you, especially because I got you in trouble over the watch, but..." My heart was racing, and I could feel the blood rushing to my face. "What letter, Charlie?" "It was delivered on Saturday while I was helping Papa. I couldn't understand why he was pulling papers out of the file on his desk and checking his bank book. I peeked while he was helping a customer. The letter said we're 6 months behind in payments, and Papa is to make an appointment with Mr. Lockhart immediately." "How could this possibly be your fault, Charlie?" "My leg. I saw the papers. Papa borrowed $5,000 for the doctor to come from Boston. He had to agree to sign over the house, the store, and everything we own as collateral for the loan. I saw it. Papa signed his name at the bottom." I sat next to Charlie and put my arm around his shoulder. I knew Mama and Papa had never meant for Charlie or me to see those papers, or they would have been in the drawer with Papa's medal, the citizenship papers, and the scattered watch pieces. "That's why Papa was so quiet at dinner. He went to see Mr. Lockhart this afternoon," added Charlie. His chin puckered up and his lower lip quivered. The soup I ate at dinner bubbled inside my stomach, and I swallowed hard to keep it from coming back up. I finally understood why Mama had been crying. I cleared my throat and spoke very slowly so that my voice wouldn't shake. I wouldn't let Charlie know how frightened I was. "Charlie, this is not your fault. The accident was not your fault. The Great Depression is not your fault. It's dominoes. When one thing goes wrong, other things fall right behind it, no matter how hard or how fast you work to stop them." A cold chill ran down my spine. I pulled Charlie closer to me and wrapped a blanket around the two of us. What I didn't tell my little brother was that the fallen dominoes had worked their way right up Maple Avenue to our front porch. Chapter 12, Victory Medal. As usual, Charlie was snoring away, only this time he had cried himself to sleep on my bed. I sat on the floor and continued to scan the newspapers. I knew Mama and Papa would talk once they thought Charlie and I were asleep. It was hard to think about my assignment, so I quietly turned the pages of the newspaper and looked at the pictures. One photo in particular caught my attention. It was a picture of some women seated around Mrs. Roosevelt. The article underneath was written by E.D. Kirby. It mentioned that Mrs. Roosevelt had held a press conference for women journalists just 2 days after her husband's inauguration. The sound of chairs scraping against the floor interrupted my reading. Mama and Papa were sitting down at the dining room table. I walked softly to the top step and sat. I think Charlie may have seen the letter. Papa's voice was just above a whisper. It was foolish of me to think we could hide it forever. We came so close to losing him. I would do it all again if I had to. The doctor from Boston was the best answer. It was the only thing to do, answered Mama. Margot and Charlie had to find out sooner or later. They are older now and will understand. The dishes in the china cabinet rattled as Papa slammed his hand down on the table. How can I ask my children to understand if I can't understand? Papa's voice grew louder. It isn't the money for the operation. It's the sorrow I see in the eyes of those I pass on the street. It's the hungry children I see standing in line for the soup kitchen. It's the anger and frustration I hear coming from a neighbor's home. And it's the heartache I feel when I can't even afford a pound of peanut butter kisses for my children. I heard Papa's chair scrape the floor and the drawer of the server open. I slid down 3 steps to where I could peek out from behind the railing. The deep crease in Papa's brow and the misery look in his eyes made me swallow back the lump in my throat. Papa pulled out the medal and papers he cherished and clenched them tightly in his hands. This medal was given to me when I fought in the Great War and earned my citizenship of this country, he said. I was Margot's age in Italy when I dreamed of coming to the United States. I close my eyes and still see the tears people cried as our ship passed the Statue of Liberty. There must be an answer for us now. Nobody will take our home. Papa lifted the victory medal he had been awarded by the army and dangled it in the air by its ribbon. He stared at it. Then he tightened his fingers around the circular bronze medal until his hand shook. I could no longer fight back the tears. A sob escaped my lips. Papa turned and saw me. He and Mama were out of their seats and up the stairs in no time. They sat next to me on the steps, cradling me in their arms. Mama looked up and noticed Charlie standing at the top of the stairs. He must have heard everything because Mama was wiping tears from his eyes when he sat next to me. Margot and Charlie, there's more we must tell you, said Mama. Papa began. Charlie, you saw the papers? Yes, Papa. Then you know everything except one thing. If your Mama and I had to make a decision for Margot's health, we would find the best doctor and the best solution. We would do what we did for you. There was no right or wrong. There was only one answer, to find the doctor who could save your life and your leg, if possible. We would make the same decision all over again, Charlie. Now the bank wants the money I borrowed. We can't pay it because people don't always pay me in cash. We are never hungry because many of them pay with food from their farms. We will have canned goods all winter because they pay me with the fruit of their hard work. Again, there is no right or wrong. It is only the answer. The bank doesn't see it my way. I tried to explain, but they insist on money. I don't have the payments I can't meet. They will give us 2 weeks to catch up on bank payments. You must tell them the rest, said Mama, as she reached across Charlie and me and took Papa's hand in hers. Papa sighed. Tomorrow, a sign will be posted on our front door, a sheriff sale sign. You know what that means. You must remember this is your home, and we have 2 weeks. You hold your head high when you go in and out of our door. I was determined not to cry. Just 2 days ago, Rosa had asked me what I would take with me if I had to leave. Well, now I knew 2 things for sure. I would never leave, and there had to be a way to help Papa save our home. I might be just a kid, but I would find somebody to listen to me. Papa looked at Charlie and me. I could see he was just as determined. Margot, there was a small ray of hope when Charlie needed help, and we found it. Charlie, the doctors thought it would take a miracle for you to get well, and it happened. We can do it again. Margot, you hold this for me while Mama and I find the answer. It will give us all courage. Papa opened his fingers and gently placed the medal in my hand.